Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your hosts, Russell Martin and Brent Aiken. We are glad that you're joining us today, and we hope that you find this conversation helpful, insightful, and encouraging as you lead your students in ministry. We wanted to stop and take a second to remind you about our social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Talk Student Men. You can also find our website, studentministryconversations.org. And then also we are on Clubhouse, and you can find us in our Clubhouse room, Student Ministry Convos, where we host Clubhouse rooms on Monday afternoons and Thursday mornings. Today, we're going to have an interview with Chad McElveen, and he shares a little bit about what we have learned from the last year of youth ministry. And so, Russell, this was your conversation. So can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I talked with Chad. He's a friend that's been in our conference with youth ministry for a long time, and I've done some events with him and camps and stuff. And we just sit and talk about looking back over this past year, what have we learned from this, and maybe taking a chance to reevaluate. I know a lot of times we get caught up in this cycle, and you can plan your summer out 3 years in advance because you know you're going to do all these trips and all these things. But what if you looked at it differently? And maybe one of the lessons from this past year has been to reevaluate and figure out, are we being intentional about everything we are doing? And so we talked through a whole bunch of other things, but that's the key part in there is really to look and to evaluate and not just jump back in just to erase, this past year and go, hey, we're just going to go back to normal. But maybe there's a new way to do things that is more effective than what we have done all the time.
Awesome. So without any more delay, here is Russell's conversation with Chad McElveen.
Tell me who you are without telling me who you are. So I know you're Chad. I know you're a youth director. But if you took those two things out and someone said, you can't tell me your name or what you do, tell me who you are.
I am humorous. Oh dang, that's a tough question. I've seen those challenges online too, but I'm like, oh, I never thought about it like this. So yeah, I guess humorous, laid back, but at the same time, very not laid back. Just kind of willing to try anything, and yeah. Bald. I don't know.
I didn't know how tough a question that would be when I asked it. So, but you're the second podcast today, and both of them have been kind of like, oh, I never thought about that. That's hard because our identity is so tied in either our name or what we do. Is what our identity, is tied in. So one of the things that you have navigated, we've all navigated over the past year, has been COVID. And one of the things what I wanted to talk about was kind of like maybe some of the things that how you did through that, and then just kind of how that's changed ministry and how that's changed what you've done, and stuff like that. So can you tell me, kind of go back, if you can rewind to about this time last year? And I know you don't want to relive that. I'm asking you to relive the trauma, but just kind of tell us some of the process. Maybe take us through an overview, a skim over of March then for a while of what y'all did, how you adapted, how you got to where you are now.
What's interesting is I wouldn't say it's necessarily like journaling, but I do kind of write down I keep notes of kind of what happens each day. And so I'll look at it each year. So now when I'm looking at this day a year ago, I'm like, oh, wow, everything was so new. Like everything was so different. Everything was so fresh. And so I had all of our experimenting with stuff with Zoom and all that. And it's funny, seeing how I wrote it. I was just saying, we had a great turnout. Students really enjoyed it. And I know eventually I'll get to the point where it's nobody showed up and nobody was interested in that game anymore. Because really, I think it really is today, on this day last year, we were doing the scavenger hunts where you tell them to go find something in their house. And I remember that was just a pretty exciting thing, seeing lots of student ministry, other people in student ministry talking about it. But then I think that quickly, we only did that maybe 2 times before students just kind of lost interest in that. And But yeah, I guess it just shows how much we were trying to adapt and all that. Yeah, I mean, when it first started, like, I would say the first thing I learned from it was it really made me realize how much I just need to slow down. And because before it really was, I was really having to track my hours and that was just for me personally, tracking my hours. So make sure I would actually just stick to close to 40 hours a week, where I would easily go over that. And I just remember when the pandemic hit, I stopped tracking it because I realized, like, I'm sure I'm doing a decent amount of work, but like I don't have as much. And so what I mean by that is, like, I just kind of slowed down and just started focusing to be more relational than planning a bunch of programs and planning a bunch of events and planning a whole bunch of other stuff. I was just like, well, let's just slow down. Let's just meet a couple of times with students and just see how they're doing and talk with them. And yeah, so I think that was the first thing I definitely learned, and I realized was like, man, I think this is something I really needed. Was just, I know it sounds weird to say that I needed the pandemic, but I kind of needed something to, and it really taught me to just slow down and just be more relational with students instead of just trying to plan everything. Um, so yeah, I think that was like the first thing. Um, let's see. And I guess something else I'm really learning, I'm still learning this today because I think we're along with everyone else of just kind of struggling with our numbers of, there's just been so many students that have just disappeared. And like, I mean, like early on in the pandemic, like the minute the pandemic hit, like, and the minute they weren't going to school, I just had some students just disappear. And it's like, I've tried reaching out to them. Sometimes I was able to talk to their parents, but yeah, and that's been a challenge. But one thing I have learned is that just because they're absent from our events and absent from the things we're doing doesn't mean we can't still minister to them and we can't still support them. And so one thing I've taken up, and I started it kind of here and there throughout the summer 2020. I had other adult leaders and other volunteers helping me with it, and I kind of did it throughout the fall, but it really wasn't until like October that I was just like, I was really feeling like at a loss. And I was just like, man, there's so many people, like, they were so active and I really had a good relationship with them, but I haven't talked to them in so long. And so then what I decided to do was I set aside time each week, on usually it was Thursdays, to just call families. It wasn't necessarily reaching out to the student, but it was just calling the parents, calling the families, and I would try to do like maybe 10 a week. And I have a pretty big roster, and so it really did take me till maybe the beginning of March to get through my whole roster of people, just calling them once. Sometimes I had to leave a message, and it was just fine. I let them know who I was, and just letting them know I'm thinking and praying for them. If there's anything I could be more prayer for, just give me a call. Um, I ended up having some really good conversations with some parents, even some of the, those parents that you think that, like, really, I don't even think I could point them out to you because they're just like the parents who drop off the students. And so I'm like, I don't think I've ever had a conversation with this mom or this dad ever, but I call them and I just say, hey, I'm Chad with St. Peter's. And they're just like, oh, hey, Chad. Like, the way they just kind of, it's like, well, I guess they know me. And then they, a lot of them just open up about what they've been going through. Some of them have had COVID. Some of them have been being very careful. Some of them share their frustrations with all the shutdowns. And like, so it was just kind of all over the place. And so I just sat there and listened to them, and happy to just talk with them. And so I think that was something I was just like, I don't think I would have ever done this if it wasn't for like the pandemic. So it definitely kind of made me learn that. And because if at the very least, what I can do is just let parents and families know that, hey, we're here for you. We're here for you. And it's okay if you're not coming to worship. It's okay if you're having to figure things out, but just know that we're still here for you. And so I think that's been a good learning moment for me, and it's something I love ending my week by doing that too. And so, Yeah.
Well, that was something that initially, because I was doing the same thing, we started, and I had a friend, Marlo Matthews. I don't know if Marlo made online prayer stations, and I posted them on the blog, and I figured out Zoom games and Jackbox and all these type things, and I figured out all that stuff. But the thing that I struggled most with, I'd love to share if you had the same thing, was. Oh, sorry, I'll cut that part out. My wife was texting me. I'm using my phone as my camera, my webcam. So, so one of the things I struggled most with during that time was the definition of success. What success was, and so I'd like to did you kind of struggle with the same thing, and what were you thinking through that time? And because for me, it seemed like the goalpost moved, and it didn't just get further away. It like got moved to the other side of the stadium behind a wall. And so what were you thinking, and what were the goalposts? How did you redefine what success looked like? What you could say, I did my job because I did this.
Yeah, it's hard to, I'll sit there and I'll be like, oh, the number one person to argue against, like, oh, it's not about numbers, but like, let's face it, like that's just always the thing, and usually that's kind of the thing that you're like held accountable to by maybe your supervisors or whatever. It's just kind of like, oh, if people aren't showing up, then something must be wrong. And so I think and so it's hard for me to even get away from that, and I can tell myself, oh, it's not about numbers, all I want. But at the end of the day, if I have an event and hardly anyone shows up, I'm still sitting there wondering, like, man, what did I do wrong? Man, what happened? And I think like what happened was, and I think this is just the whole church too, because I know our pastors are feeling it with worship, like whether it's online worship and I mean, we were just a fraction of what we used to have, and we used to have on a Sunday morning, we would have 5 different services at 2 different venues. Now we're down to 2, and it's like we wouldn't be able to fill up those venues if we were completely in person, right? Like at least if it was the way it is now. And so I know that even our pastors and other church members have kind of felt this, but I think that like knowing that we're all on the same page with that, knowing that we all know that there's a reason why this is happening, I think this really kind of took a lot of pressure off in terms of worrying about numbers. And so then that means you could kind of redirect, like, well, what is the success now? Kind of what you're saying, well, where is that goalpost now? And I guess now it's like, it's not, I don't know, I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase this, is like, it seems like the numbers, yes, you do your part, but it seems like you're putting a lot on the church members to be here. Like it's kind of up to them to show up. Now it seems like for me, I feel like it's more about what am I doing to make myself known to them? Like what am I doing to let them know I'm available to them? What am I doing to let them know that they matter? What am I doing to let them know I'm praying for them? It's not about them showing up. It's about me just kind of, what can I do? So if it's through text messages, if it's through social media, if it's through weekly emails, if it's through other stuff, like what am I doing? And so I don't know if that's really the right thing or not, but I think that's ever since I've kind of put my mindset behind that, and still at the same time, I said earlier, I need to slow down. I try not to overdo it either, but I don't know. I guess like where the goalposts and what it could be is just what are we doing just to reach people and just to talk with them and just to listen to them. Um, yeah, I mean, just whatever those opportunities are, and those have ranged from Zoom meetings to in-person small groups, meeting out in parks, to we even had a small group. We called them connect groups, and they were through text messages. So we had students, different age groups, and male and female in different groups, and we just texted each other once a week with prompts and how they were doing. That was pretty strong at the whenever they weren't in school, but once everyone started going back to school, then it started dwindling, because really we went from like about, I think like 12 different text groups. Some of them I wasn't even a part of. We had adult leaders that were part of it, so that was pretty cool. and then it just started like, it's just students weren't responding as much anymore. And a lot of them just kind of said, yeah, I think it served its purpose. And now we're down to like maybe 2 that are still going. And we asked them, would y'all like for us to give this up? And they're like, no, we still love it. Like, so it's just a big range of just, what are we doing just to actually just reach people? Yeah.
And I think that's hugely important. And I think there's something to be said for things that are done for a time. Like, the games or the programs or things that you did some of those things may last, and some of those things may just have been for that period of time. So on that vein, a couple of things, because I've watched you online. You've done some awesome things. I'll watch your Instagram and things like that. So what are some of the things that you did that worked really well, that you thought was a good connection point, even if it was just for COVID period of time? But what are some of those things that you adapted? Because what I'm thinking is there may be some people who are like, hey, that may work in my context even outside of this. So
I guess thinking about like very early on, I don't know how helpful this would be, as seems like things are kind of already changing, but like something I felt like it worked really well was I played around a lot with Zoom and really try to figure out what's the best way to get students to do lessons. And like, because I know everyone was struggling with that. And I feel like we did something that worked pretty well with a good portion of our students. Now, not everybody, but like we try to make as interactive lessons as possible. And that's something I always try to do that anyway. I try to do my best to avoid just lecture type lessons or anything like that. And so what we did on Zoom was, and we're still doing this, we still have a good, strong group of students who meet us for Sunday school. And they love doing these interactive lessons. And I tell them that this is the highlight of my week, is our conversations and the creativity that they do. And so basically it's like, I'll share my screen with like a PowerPoint. And then on there, each slide would have a kind of a different thing saying, oh, let's read this scripture together. Now you'll use the annotate feature to underline what stood out to you in this passage. So then they'll start underlining it, or they'll highlight it in some way. And then we'll get to a next slide and it'll say, hey, write and draw what you think this looked like, or write and draw, what do you think of when you hear this? And so then they just draw. And so some of them are very artistic. And so it's almost, you have to tell them, hey, we don't have enough time for you to finish that. You need to go quicker. And so stuff like that. So just trying to work, because a lot of them weren't talking on Zoom. Like they just mute themselves, and then it was almost like a pain to tell them to unmute themselves. But interacting like that, where they could use the chat or they could write it out on our screen or something, that just worked out pretty well. I think one of the things that I think it's really helped was we limited, because we don't want students on here on Zoom for 2 hours, right? So we limited what we were doing like to a maximum of an hour. And so then whenever we were starting to meet in person, we were meeting in person, and I was like, well, we're not going to move it to 2 hours, because most of the time we have to just stay in our seats. Like there's no getting up and running around. And so we were trying to be very careful with that. And so we're like, well, shoot, like, let's just make it an hour. And so I have noticed like the biggest difference, and especially our junior high students and their attention, is like just dedicating just that 1 hour is all that you need. Beforehand, we would meet. What we did was we met on Wednesdays. We met for 2 hours, and that 2 hours included food, it included games, and then we would try to get them to settle down for worship and a lesson. And they didn't. It just never took. The worship and lesson part, it just never happened, because if like we're pretty much, I always say, we're shaking up the can and we're just getting them riled up. Like, and so, but once we started meeting in person, and some of this was with some of our newer students, like sixth graders, who really probably weren't familiar with what we had done in the past. But even some of our returning students and all that, like when we started meeting in person just for that hour, just for Bible study, and then we would do a more low key type of game, like maybe Mafia, or something else. And just for that hour, it was just like, this is good. I'm not, and I personally was never leaving there just feeling frustrated and angry that like, oh, students, they just won't pay attention. Oh, this is just, yeah, like it was. And so I think I've definitely learned like, man, we could do a lot in an hour and it could be very impactful. And maybe this is what they need. And so I really do think moving forward, I'm going to be more intentional into what we're planning and what those events really are. So like if I want to have a time of worship, I'm not going to mix in big games and big other stuff with that. I'm just going to make it, no, this is going to be our hour time of worship, our hour time of Bible study, our hour time of small group, whatever it is. And then we'll plan another time of, oh, now this would be where our games are. If you want to play a game, come to this event right here. And so not mix up the two. And I'm looking forward to see like what that turns out to, like when we do that a lot more in person.
What gives you the freedom to do that? Because I have something in my mind, but I want to see if you think of that. What made you change that kind of mindset? Was it just the doing it in on Zoom and seeing an hour works, or kind of what helps you to come to that conclusion, or at least to say you're going to try it?
I mean, I think it was like, I mean, yes, the kind of time limit with Zoom was a big thing, but like also, it seemed like most of the spring of 2020, even most of the summer, I would even say, like we really didn't even have much of a time for Bible study or worship or anything. Like, and with students specifically, because most of it really was just whatever we could do just to interact with them. And so we had plenty of fun and games. And then some of it wasn't necessarily like games. It was more about just, hey, come in and we're going to check in on you on a scale of 1 to 10. How are you doing? What can we pray for you? What are your struggles right now? And so we did have dedicated times for that, but we really didn't have too much time of studying. And so whenever we finally kind of, once the fall was hitting, we're like, we need to have this. And so we really dedicated some time to just do that. But then we're like, wait, but these games and other stuff we're doing is really good too. How about we don't combine them? Let's just keep them separate, and let's just kind of meet students where they are. And then some students may not be comfortable yet enough or vulnerable enough to like come and share and open up about who they are, but they are more comfortable just, hey, let's just play some games and get to know each other first. Yeah.
I see that. I see students who, and then you'll also have students who won't come to the games because they're like, hey, I've got Xbox at home. I can do this. Mm-hmm. I don't like group games. And so I think it does also, it's almost like when you try to do either two styles of worship together, or you have junior high and senior high together. You always have the senior high who think the junior high are too immature, and the junior high who don't want to be with the older senior high. But when you split them, then you get more come. And I think the same thing happens when you do that with the games you get the kids who want to do games, and maybe they'll say, hey, come join us on Tuesday. We're doing Bible study, or vice versa with those type of things. So as you've gone through and you've tried new things, what two-part question, you can answer either part or both, and you've kind of already hinted at it, but maybe you can add some more to it. What did you stop doing because of COVID that you'll never do again? What did you start doing during COVID that you're like, why you kick yourself going, why did I never do this before? So for me, an example of something that I started when I was there, we started doing a college meetup on Friday night game night, or Thursday night game night on Zoom. And after the first 2 or 3 of them, I was like, I'm dumb, because I could have been doing this for the past 3 years. Yeah. College students are spread out. It wasn't because of COVID. It was just they're spread out. And I had kids from A&M and Texas Tech and all these things coming in. And we did a game night, lasted about an hour. We played some Jackbox games. I checked in on them, prayed for them. We ended up talking afterwards. But I was like, why haven't I ever done this before? So either one of those or both. What's something you stopped doing and you won't start, or something you started doing that you won't stop?
Yeah, maybe kind of what I was already talking about. But like, I mean, some of the things I said earlier is I'm not going to stop doing our family check-ins and stuff. So even if we get like to where families are back to attending in person, and then we see students more often, I'm still want to kind of keep that as a weekly thing. So I do want to do that. I do think that I'm going to stop kind of like I was doing maybe a 2 hour long, just everything in that one evening kind of a thing. I want to be more intentional into what we're doing. And I really am like, the way I've kind of seen the pandemic was, we can easily see like volcanoes and lava as like being this very destructive thing, but then like that's just a part of the environment to where like it actually ends up helping. New growth comes from it, and so I'm really seeing this as like this lava of the pandemic just kind of took over everything, and it just kind of canceled all sorts of things that we were already doing. But now what I'm really hoping to see is like, well, now we're going to have some new growth. And so we're going to have some new opportunities. And I'm all about like trying to do some new stuff and not just going back to the same old, same old. And so I am looking forward to some of these things. So like not going back to an old 2 hour model, but instead like we'll just dedicate hour times for that type of stuff. And so maybe it's Sundays will be dedicated just to worship and Bible study type events, and then during the week will be the game time events, and then like so moving that way. um and also just like I realized with meeting on Zoom and to kind of help keep attention was, I'm still bad at this, at keeping lessons just short and to the point. but but um but it also kind of keeping a routine or a rhythm of it. I really realized that helps. And I was trying to do that anyways with in-person stuff before the pandemic. And I was just really struggling with it. But since we started meeting, and it really was like, I don't want it to make it sound like students have just become robotic, but like when we set out the chairs, they know where they're sitting. And then whenever we say, hey, we're going to open up in this prayer, they know what this opening prayer is going to be. And when we say we're going to do this, they know that we're going to be reading scripture, and they know that we're going to be. So in no way am I saying, hey, come on, we're going to play dodgeball today. And then before they play dodgeball, we're trying to force worship on them. And then they're just like, they don't know what to do. And they're like, what? Like, this isn't what I came for. And so I want to try to move away from that. Just like, get into these rhythms of, no, you know what to expect when you get here. And this is kind of and just help get in the right mindset too. Of and from that I've had some great conversations with our junior high students where before, it's just a struggle. It was just a struggle to get them on topic and all that. Other than that, like I really do think like I really saw a lot of flaws in how we had done some stuff. And so one of them was we d- I ha- we had a good team of adult leaders. And before the pandemic, we had a great team of adult leaders. But then once the pandemic hit and we started moving to Zoom, a lot of the adult leaders just weren't comfortable doing stuff on Zoom. Like they felt uncomfortable about it, and they just said that maybe this isn't their strong point and all this. And no blame to them at all on that, but it did kind of point out to me like, man, like I need to really work on our adult leaders and their relationship with students. That this type of thing would never interfere with that. Those adult leaders were great for showing up, and they were great for leading the small groups, but maybe they weren't there yet to where they were just like, no, I need to stay connected to this group. I had some that were. I had some great adult leaders who definitely all the way to the end, like, and still continuing to stay connected with them. But I think that's definitely a flaw that I saw was, and some of our adult leaders just they just backed away. And I was like, okay, so I need to make sure when we do get adult leaders, they kind of know that they're in this for better or worse, for kind of a thing. And at the same time, I'd definitely be respectful to them and their time and what they're comfortable with too. But yeah. Also I think it's just like, I really hope churches everywhere have seen some flaws that maybe their churches have had during this. And one of them I think a lot of churches have seen is, I think a lot of people, just because they couldn't come to church in person, that caused a disconnect between them and God. Like I've seen, we've had some church members who are very strong church members, and I'm pretty sure they just stopped doing anything with the church, and they just stopped doing anything just because they couldn't come at that one time that they go every week. And I think we as a church need to do better at like teaching people like that's not what it's about, and teach them more about like the parable I always go back to is the parable of the sower. And I really feel like I think this pandemic has really shown that a lot of people are the seeds that scattered on the rocky soil. And then what we see is that when the sun came out, they quickly withered away. And I think once this pandemic came, it really pointed out like some people's roots weren't strong enough, and they just withered away. Nothing to blame on them or anything, but I think it's more on like the church and like how we teach like what exactly church is, and that it's this place you go to on Sunday morning. And if you can't do that, well, there goes your there goes your relationship with God. And so I think it really is like whatever I do moving forward, I really want to be more intentional and make sure that it's not that rocky soil type of ministry, but the good soil, so that if this happens again, yes, things would be different. Yes, we could probably still maybe lose touch with some people, but we know that they're still going to be in a good place, and they know that they're still, you know, they still know that the church is there for them, and they know God's there for them, all that. And some of that goes with like, think about this, just like mission trips is when the pandemic hit in summer 2020, a lot of people had to cancel those trips. And to a lot of students, what they're being told is, oh, that means you don't serve this year because this trip was canceled. That means you don't have to serve or help people this year because that one trip you go on once a year isn't happening. We need to get away from that type of thinking, and instead of just thinking about like, we're in a different situation. How can we serve people now? How can we serve people this week? What about next week? What about the week after that? What about this and this and this? And so, yeah, like, I guess it was because of the pandemic, I started working with students, trying to figure out what are they passionate about serving. And we met with a certain group of them. It wasn't like a biggest group, but just a group of students that we just kind of worked with them, and kind of through like kind of like a 6-week process and meeting on Zoom, that group kind of got smaller because some people started dropping off from it. But we still had this very small group of students who were just like, I think we really want to help like by doing this type of stuff. And so that's what we're doing now, like currently, is just writing cards and letters to nursing homes and assisted living facilities and places like that. And so it's starting to kind of very slowly, it's starting to kind of grow and try to expand to like other students and other families are getting interested in helping us out with that. But that's just one of those things, is like when we met with them, just telling them serving isn't just once a year. It isn't just a place you have to go far away to do. It's what are you passionate about helping, and what are the needs that you see, and how can we help in those ways? And so I think that's another way. It's just like, I don't want to go back to just teaching and giving this impression that a mission trip is all you do. And maybe the same thing is just with other trips too. Maybe it's church camps and other stuff. It's just like, yes, that's a bummer that those things got canceled, but you know what? We're still going to do some amazing stuff. And your faith and your relationship with God shouldn't have to rely on just those things.
I do think it revealed where our priorities were, and where we just assumed things were happening that they weren't. Like you talked about with small group leaders and stuff like that. I know that if we had, we'd have a good number of kids show up, and I was like, great, we had a great week. But when I started doing those phone calls, I realized, yeah, we had a great week, but there were still 40 kids I could have called. I assumed we had a great week. We had great numbers. Everything was good. I had my small group leaders there. Small groups worked. But all of a sudden you realize, that, yeah, that's great. That's awesome. But there's still, when you take your value from that 1 week event or something like that, you're not making those connections with everybody and realizing there's still a bunch everywhere. So has this been, when you're looking, I think this conversation will be a little different, or question will be different, asking it at the beginning, because at the beginning, everybody was like, yes, we are in this. This is hybrid. This is a change. This will change the future. What's interesting is to watch as things do open back up, as we do have the ability to get back in person. I guess the question is was this an adaptation or an innovation? So if you're being innovative, it's something new that's going to last forever. But do you also see either with your colleagues or in your church or something like that, people who 3 months ago were like, yes, we're changing. And now they're like, oh yeah, but we can have what we had back. We can go back to Israel we can go back to Egypt. It wasn't great, but at least we knew it was going to happen. And they get that draw back to that.
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it. The only thing I think of is like, I don't know. I hope that this is more of like an evolution that is kind of like, that is like, we've been put into this kind of new era, this new atmosphere, this new environment. And then we have to learn, yes, to adapt, which just led to us to innovate. But I hope that I don't know. I just hope it continues that we don't lose touch with this. And I hope churches don't either. Like, I hope, I know our church, and I know I've heard our pastors even say like things are not going to be the same. Like, and I'm glad that to hear them say that, because I know the easy thing, and even I may say it. I can't wait for things to go back to normal, right? Like, but there's going to be a whole new normal and a whole new thing, and I really want to take advantage of. There's no better excuse than to try doing new things right now. Like, and I really want to try to stress that to people. Like, if you ever had any wanting to try something, this is the time. Before, you may have pitchforks and angry mobs saying, you can't get rid of this one event. But now is like, well, we haven't been able to do this event for over a year. So what if we kind of do this and kind of tweak it? Or what if we did like completely move it to a new day and we completely change this? But at the same time, it still takes a lot of planning. You need to be careful. You still need to be careful with whatever changes you do. But I mean, I say yes, we had to adapt, but like, I really hope that this innovation just pushes us even further. And one funny thing I noticed was, and I wonder if everyone else noticed this. It really did seem like student ministry was kind of leading the way with all sorts of stuff, because I want to say anytime, and I don't think our pastors would ever give me credit for it. I don't know why, but like, I want to say anytime we did something, they would soon do something similar, and they would do something. And then I would notice it like just church-wide, obviously in our, Facebook group with other youth leaders, they'd be saying all this stuff. I'm like, oh, that's new. Oh, that's great. That's a good idea. And then later you start seeing churches, like the pastors starting to say that too. And you're just kind of like, okay, yeah.
I saw that. I saw that definitely as and actually it's something I enjoyed coming over here to this role and taking everything I did as youth pastor and adapting it church wise. I think it set me up in a different perspective than a lot of pastors have, because I come from 25 years of youth ministry and all the adaptation and things like this. I was like, I mean, if there was something I was built for. I definitely think that God used all my experiences and everything in this time, and it would have been completely different if it was a year ago, or 2 or 3 years ago, or 2 years, 3 years in the future. I think it would have been a completely different dynamic making this change.
And like one example for this is like, and it frustrated me when I was in a church council meeting. And so they were talking about, we've been doing a very limited like worship services, like who could participate, or the attendance and who could be in the congregation at one time. And so, but we have been doing in-person stuff. But we haven't really done too many, or at least the church hasn't advertised too many like adult, like Sunday school classes meeting in person, or adult, like small group type stuff. And it's always kind of baffled me. Like, I never understood that why. And then when I was in this one church council meeting and they were talking about, oh, when can these come back? And when can they do this and this? And I was sitting there thinking, like, whenever they're saying coming back, I'm like, I really don't think our student ministry ever left. We were able to adapt and meet outside at different times and different days and different things and all of this. And it kind of broke my heart to hear like some of these people were like, well, we need to meet back in this one classroom at this 1 hour. Otherwise we can't meet. And I'm just like, what? and so, yeah. And so I really feel like we're able to adapt with that.
What is it that helped you to adapt, and what do you think that you can, what are the not lessons you learned? I've used that phrase a whole lot. Let me try again. What are the ways that you think that you can put into place, or that either help you, that you already have, or that you are planning on as you that make you able to adapt, right? That make you able to, because it might not be a pandemic this time. It may be, we got shut down for 2 weeks with winter. It may be a change in school schedules, or it may be a change, who knows what's coming ahead. You can't plan for specific events, but what are the nuggets and the tools that are in your tool belt that help you to be adaptable to whatever that is? That maybe another youth leader watching going, hey, that would be great. I need to do that. Or even a church going, hey, what can the church learn from youth ministry? Let me rephrase that question. I'm going to do it that way. What can the church learn from youth ministry? Maybe y'all's, or youth ministry in general, that why was youth ministry able to make that adaptation and innovation a lot better than churches? And what can the church do? What would you tell a pastor? What would you tell me? Hey, think this way. This is going to help you to be able to adapt, or here's how we adapted, and here's what it would help you.
I don't know if I can give like a tip or anything, but what I can share is like my motivation for it really was just my mission field is students. How can I interact with students? Like that really was the main thing. If I go through a week and don't talk with, communicate, or anything with any students or even their families, then it's kind of like, then what am I doing? Like, and so my thing was like, I need to fulfill like what I feel like my mission field is. And so if that's meeting, we would have sometimes these after school hangout stuff, and it was on Zoom. It was just for students who just wanted a break. And sometimes we would have one student, sometimes we have a couple, sometimes none. And we just let them know that, we're here for you. And then whenever we adapted to meeting outside at parks, and we met for picnics and we met for other stuff, it was just, we're not going to let this hinder us from meeting with students, to let them know that they are known, to let them know that they are loved, to let them know that they matter. And just, yeah. And so that was just kind of my main motivation was I don't know what there could be to just completely stop us from doing anything like that. And then, so that's why it kind of hurts me to think of like I mean, we talked earlier about like, I think the pandemic's definitely showed flaws in like, what is the church really teaching people like about their faith and what it means to be the church. And like, so like, if someone thinks that like, oh, just because they couldn't meet that one time, well, yeah, like I really hope that we've done a better job at reaching out to them than just thinking, oh, well, they just disappeared for a year and now they're hearing that their Sunday school hours coming back. Like, yeah. And so, yeah, I guess that's like the only thing I can really say is just what is your real, I mean, that's what motivated me is like, what is your mission field and how are you going to reach that no matter what?
Well, I think that speaks to kind of the theme that's been through this conversation is, when we talk about goalpost and we talked about what's your success, where you find success and all those type things is if you put your success and your mission and stuff is to have a successful program at a certain time, in a certain place, whether that's a big church service, or whether that's a Bible study, whatever that is, if that is your deal, then whenever that's gone, it's gone. But as you said, if success is connecting with students or connecting with your older Sunday school class or connecting with your church or with your choir or whatever that is, whatever your field is, if your goal is connecting, then you'll find different ways to connect. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's almost like traveling and having a list of you've done Yom Army. And so sometimes, in the old days, you would have just a written directions. Yeah. There was no map, there was just written directions. And it's a lot different because if you turn wrong way or something like that, you're lost forever. Mm-hmm. But if you have a map, you can reroute. Your destination's here and you can reroute. But if you are fixed on, I'm going to go this road and this road is closed, then you can't go that way. But if your goal is, I'm going to get to this address, you can reroute and go different ways and drive through yards or, gravel roads or wherever. Yeah. But it may not be the best route, may not be the fastest, May not be the most efficient or safest, but that makes it that goal. So, all right. So to kind of wrapping up, I'm going to go a couple of two things. Yeah, I'll edit that out too. So wrapping up, just have a couple of things. One is as you've gone through this, I know you've done some games and some things like that. So if you have, real quick, you have 15 minutes or 20 minutes until lunch starts or until something starts, and you have a group of kids and you have no items to play with and you don't have time to prep, what is a game or something like that you're going to do with them? Something that somebody listening to this could go, I can use that as well.
Well, I mean, the obvious is Mafia. It's always a big hit, and
but you need, don't you need cards for that?
No, like what I do is, yeah. What to me, it baffles me when people get restricted to cards. I'm like, what are y'all doing? Like, I guess I get that. If you, I don't know. Usually, what I do is I take on the role, or maybe I'll have rarely will I let a student, but maybe I'll have an intern or another adult leader take on the role as narrator. And then you as a narrator, you tell everyone to close their eyes and you go around in a circle. And what I did during the pandemic was everyone was spaced out. They close their eyes. I tell them to stick their foot out. And so then I would go up and I'll be like, all right, if I tap your foot, you're the Mafia. If I tap your foot, you're the detective. If I tap your foot, you're the doctor or whatever, all these other roles. And so then you just tell them to look up and they know what their role is. And then you just go through the game of Mafia, which if you don't know how to play, you can find there's instructions all over the place and good videos. There's that one. Another good one is usually, it worked really well on Zoom. But it can work in person if everyone has cell phones and you don't mind giving out your number to everybody and then they could text you. But like I'm a huge fan of the U quiz. And basically it's just you just ask a question. You just ask it like, what is your favorite hobby? Or maybe you can say, what is your worst injury? Or what is your dream vacation spot? And so you can just ask any random question like that. And then students will text you, or if you're on Zoom, they could put it in the chat and they just direct chat you. If you're in person, you have slips of paper and pens and you can use that. And then all you do is you go through those and you just read them. Oh, well, somebody said their hobby is playing the tuba. And then everyone has to like point on who they think it is, and you're all trying to guess who it is. And eventually it narrows down. And when you get to the last two, you said, all right, somebody is this and somebody's this. Which one is it? And then it's a good way to get to know students. I have never seen students get bored with it. And that's with junior high and high school. And it's just, that's always my go-to is finding a way to like play that if we're able to. And it can easily buy up a lot of time too. So.
Awesome. All right. So how can we connect with you if somebody wants to find out more about what you do or just pick your brain? I know you do some awesome interactive games and things like that. So if someone wants to call and say, hey, Chad, what's up? Like, what's the best way to connect online with you? Is Facebook or?
Yeah, I mean, Facebook and my email address is on our church website. So go to stpkaty.org/students and you can find my email there. But yeah, look up Chad. I think I actually have, I have facebook.com/chad.mcelveen1. I didn't get the final one. Some other Chad McElveen out there got it.
There was one other one.
But yeah, contact me that way, email me. Yeah, those would be good ways.
Yeah, I tried to do a lot of things with Russell Martin, but the baseball player kind of throws me off of.
There's so many Russell Martins.
Yeah, it's not a deal. So, all right, well, thank you very much, and I look forward to talking to you later. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, that was great. Hey, thanks everyone for joining us today. We hope you were encouraged and inspired by this week's episode, and that you found tools that you can use as you pour into the lives of your students.
Yeah, and if you enjoyed this conversation and found it helpful, why don't you just leave a comment or a rating wherever you're listening, and we would appreciate that. Also, maybe you know someone who would benefit from this, and maybe take a moment and share this with them. Tag them on social media, and also tag us at Talk Student Men on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So Brent, this next week's conversation was your conversation. So can you tell us a little bit about what we're going to hear in a week from now?
Yeah, so I sit down with Luke Gajari. He's a friend of mine. He is a youth pastor in the same town that I am. And he had a very, very challenging idea behind this episode. And the idea and the challenge is, how do you get on board with your pastor's vision? And so we sit down and we talk through a bunch of different things, and we kind of leave with this challenge of, are you here to build a ministry, or are you here to support what your pastor's doing for the overall church? And it was super, super challenging for me. It was one of my favorite episodes that I've done. And here is a short clip from that episode.
I had to shelve a lot of my personal preference in order to make my boss happy. And there was a tension between doing things the way that I felt like they were supposed to be done and doing things that my boss wanted done. And I feel like that tension exists in ministry. There's this other dynamic going on that when ultimately we're called to submit, unless you're the lead pastor, you're called to submit to the vision of the house. Unfortunately, this is a good thing, a blessing and a curse. Many youth pastors are extremely entrepreneurial in spirit. They're very go-getters. You're also a graphic designer. You probably have a side hustle. You are extremely multifaceted, and you're very, very go-getter. You get stuff done. You have this, you could almost build a church, because you're essentially building a church within a church. The temptation is to build it around your vision and not around your pastor's vision.
Awesome. Well, as a senior pastor now, I'm definitely looking forward to that, hearing the full conversation. And I know that everybody else will be waiting to hear that as well. So just a reminder, go check out studentministryconversations.org, and we'll have show notes and links from this episode and all of our episodes. If you just search for whatever episode you want to find in the search bar, then you can find those. And we also have other articles and posts there as well. And if you happen to be on the Clubhouse app, again, look for our rooms in Student Ministry Convos Club, Monday afternoon and Thursday morning. Again, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week.